Hey everyone, this is our re-recording of the Design Bitcoin for Everyone talk from Figma Config 2021. It was fantastic, and because we don't want to wait so long until the video becomes available, we're doing a casual re-recording here. Hopefully it's
Just for
interesting
you.
to some of you. And we're going to cut here and show a short video that we've prepared, and then we will be right back and start with the presentation.
Open design, Bitcoin design. I am here, cozy, having a fireplace moment. I feel with open design, it's a new emerging area. And so to me, explaining it is sort of this idea of we are trying to figure it out. It involves folks from different disciplines coming together with a common goal. In our case, we want to make Bitcoin more usable for people.
So the main challenge with Bitcoin today, I think, is still the user experience.
Well, we need to change this narrative. And to change this narrative means that we are designing Bitcoin for everyone. We must design Bitcoin for everyone.
What does designing Bitcoin for everyone mean? To me, it means that you are designing for that software engineer that works in Silicon Valley, as well as that 10, 11-year-old living in rural Nigeria whose ideas about money are not quite formed yet.
It is an opportunity to change the way the world works. Money connects us all, but we live in a world of contrasting realities.
In the last few years, it's become pretty obvious that it's time for Bitcoin to sort of transcend the cypherpunk's basement and break out into the world and actually help the people that it was designed originally to help.
It includes people from different backgrounds, lifestyles, maybe opinions I don't agree with, or things I hadn't considered, regions in the world, languages I haven't spoken, possibly age groups who haven't been considered, people who aren't even alive yet.
My favorite part about the Bitcoin design community is that I get to make new friends from all around the world and do that while contributing to a technology that's going to fundamentally change the world.
I've always been attracted to design on the border of technology because new UI challenges and UX patterns emerge.
We're going to need to get more designers in the space. We're going to need to get more developers in the space. But really the first stage of that process is opening the whole thing up to everybody.
All right, so that was some of the beautiful people in our design community. And it seems like we all have this one thing in common, and that's we're all passionate about this thing called Bitcoin. So let's get into that a little bit. What is Bitcoin? Some people like to describe it as magic internet money. And in 2008, it had quite a mysterious beginning for sure. Little origin story. Some anonymous person or persons call themselves Satoshi Nakamoto decided to publish this white paper, and the white paper is a PDF, right? They published this white paper that laid out the technical architecture for this thing called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And this is something that many people, for decades were trying to figure out. And this is the first time that it seemed like, wow, this architecture can probably achieve this thing that we wanted to do, to create this global payment network that anyone with a computer can participate in, right? And in a few months after that, 2009, the first implementation of that software was released. And one person downloaded it and connected to Satoshi's computer, and they did transactions with one another. But then more people started downloading this software, joining the network, and this is how the network grew, right? And this kept on and on for a while, until now, right? But it was very technical persons who were able to, utilize the software, who were interested in it at the time, right? The cypherpunks and the tech nerds who are really in tune with the technology. And in 2021 now, almost everyone's heard about Bitcoin, but let's take a step back because, let's try to figure out what's the real world problem Bitcoin's trying to solve. And there's over 4 billion people that still don't have access to proper banking systems. And we have this new digital economy that's blossoming. And this is where I personally feel Bitcoin really shines, right? And as the popularity of Bitcoin continues to grow, I think that it's essential that everyone's able to participate in this new economy, regardless of their technical expertise or geography and all that, right? It kind of breaks down borders and barriers, right? Because you have this system that anyone can participate in. You don't have to give up your ID. You're not restricted to this network unless you don't have an internet connection. The minimum requirement is an internet connection and a computing device. But what is the challenge here? Why are we talking about this in the context of design? So Bitcoin is it's still overly technical, and there's a lot of design debt that has been built up over the years because of this very, technical beginnings that it started off with, right? As with any technology, in fact. But for this mass adoption thing that we're kind of this mainstream mass adoption that we're kind of angling for, that we want this to be available for anyone and everyone, we still need to make a lot of improvements on the user experience. So as designers, how do we solve this? So we tend to lean towards something called user-centered design, or I prefer to say human-centered design. And the philosophies of Bitcoin is very much about openness and open access, right? That's how it's designed. It's designed so that anyone can be able to participate in this. But designing something for everyone, user interfaces for everyone, this is a huge challenge. It's a massive undertaking. And Bitcoin has one of the largest potential user groups that a project can have, because who are the users of money? Everyone. So, when we start to get a bit abstract with this, as designers, when we start to get abstract and say we're designing for everyone, it's possible that we start losing some details and some people get left behind or not included in that process, right? Because they're maybe not part of that majority that we're able to see. And so I think it's important not to talk about designing for everyone in a very vague sense. We have to understand the wants and needs of individuals that we're crafting these experiences for. Now here's the thing: not one single person is able to design something for everyone, right? One single person isn't able to design an experience that caters for everyone's wants and needs, right? Because there's different, people have different relationships towards money, right? And they have a different understanding of how money works, and even culture plays a part of this. So we can't really design a global money system by staying in a bubble, in our own bubbles of what we know. And questions come up how can the how would our interfaces adapt and those kind of things, right? And we start to see that designing for everyone becomes quite individual, customized and quite individual, right? So we have this technology now, and we know that we have to start looking at the people more. How we need to start figuring out how we could continue to make these tools and systems accessible to them, right? Because we don't want to be gatekeepers at the end of the day. And to do that, we need to start exploring stories of these people who we may have never been in contact with before, that we don't really understand their perspective, right? We need to start creating those connections somehow, right? And there's no company behind Bitcoin, because usually you would tell the marketing department or some department in charge of research, hey, can we get some data on these users from this place and create some personas and whatnot, but we don't have this in Bitcoin, right? So how do we do that, right? How do we expose ourselves to these different perspectives, right? So one way of doing so is to seeking help by seeking help from our peers, right? And if we're able to talk to each other who are like other people who are interested in this tech and the principles, this would be a great way to do that. And about 9 months ago, when you would look out in the Bitcoin ecosystem, there's some very clever technical folks, economists, cryptographers, open source developers, still very highly technical or theoretical, right? And for a designer, it was quite lonely. And for tackling a challenge of designing interfaces for everyone, yeah, it's quite lonely, and this is a huge task. So like, you're looking out, and there's hardly anyone there that were talking about design, or at least it wasn't that easy to find those people, right? But of course they exist because products are coming out, products are being designed and whatnot, right? One of the biggest issues was siloed knowledge, and I think that tends to happen a lot with designers when we kind of like get into our own space and like kind of like shy away from the world, and like we'll get requirements and do things, and then hey, here's the big surprise. At the end of a few months design sprints, we say, hey, here's this design. And there's a lot of like repetition as well that happens, and we're not really sharing resources with one another, right? And we're not actually having those discussions with one another either, because we don't have that platform. We have the whole big internet, but still difficult to connect with one another, right? And at this time, everyone's kind of like thinking about, we need to start gathering. The idea was out there, in the ether. It was like people were thinking about it, but at 9 months ago, it didn't happen just as yet. And what were people thinking about? It was like, what if we could create the space for designers to meet? What if we could help each other like on our learning journey, or have these design resources, or even help projects, like up-level their design processes, for these open source projects. And thankfully, this was kicked off by Steve Lee, Danielle, and a few others in a Slack. It just started as a Slack, this very Slack. And it was just tens of people right in there. A friendly space for people to, who are designers who are passionate about Bitcoin, just to be able to interact with one another, talk about what this community is, try to figure out how to make design as part of the conversation a bit more, and trying to break down what problems we were trying to solve as a community. Now we're over 1,000 people, almost 2,000 now, and this is a theme I want you to remember as well throughout this presentation. Starting small and growing organically. This community started off with a Slack and a few conversations. But as we're doing these, having these conversations, we're like, okay, we definitely need to document some of what's going on here. What if, some people drop off? And which is natural in open source. We can't expect everyone to be around all the time. But we still don't want to lose all this valuable knowledge and input that we're getting. So we're like, let's document it. And for this, we use GitHub. And GitHub also allows you to like host websites for free, and that's where we have two main repositories now: the Bitcoin Design Guide and Bitcoin Design Meta. And the Meta repo is about processes, and the guide is about mostly like the website stuff. And the website itself is on bitcoin.design. You can check this out. And here is just like a collection of, all that knowledge that we're trying to put together. We have the guide there, we have projects, instructions on how to contribute, and whatnot. And the website runs as an open source project as well, because you're able to not only contribute to the content, like if you see something wrong with the website, like a word misspelled or anything, there's an edit button on the bottom of each page. You can edit this page. But the banner is actually quite cool as well. If you wanted to contribute a banner, something a bit more visual, you're able to do that. And this one here is from Alexa. It's really cool. And if you had some ideas, there's a button that says submit your own banner, and you click that and it'll give you the instructions on like the design dimensions and stuff to do that. So yeah, we're having all these discussions and activity and on GitHub, and having that face-to-face time, it was actually quite important for us, though. To be able to like just chat with each other. Again, we're a community, right? So having that face-to-face time to develop friendships and relationships with people. It made us feel a bit, close and connected, and we'd often get on these like impromptu calls just to chat about design and Bitcoin, and just help each other out if you want some feedback on something you're working on, or if you want to give some feedback on something anyone else is working on. There's a Jitsi that's pretty much running 24/7. You can click in it, invite other people to say like, hey, I'm hanging out there. You might see we do that quite often. And yeah, so we're having all these calls, and some of these calls are a bit more structured, like the Bitcoin Design Community Call. And on here, we discuss like our goals for the year. We share progress reports. We don't make decisions on these calls, right? Because we understand not everyone is able to attend the calls because of time zone issues and whatnot, limitations. So we make no decisions on the call. Decisions have to be in the open, so it will either happen in Slack here or on GitHub. That's where the decision-making thing. So anyone could be able to see, hey, this is, what's being discussed. We also record the calls, by the way. We have the design review calls as well, which is hosted by Connor. And Connor felt the need that designers needed a platform to be able to present their work to one another and get feedback with one another. So he proposed this call. Again, it was just an idea in the project ideas channel. For example, you post your idea there, and you send it off to other people to try to start that conversation. And Connor went through this process, and it's been quite successful. There's been tons of projects presenting, both design projects, like designers wanting some feedback, but also like people from the outside saying, hey, like this is cool. This is like this platform where we can get like free feedback from people who just really care about this Bitcoin thing. Why not? And for me, I noticed that you learn quite a lot about projects and about Bitcoin from attending these design reviews as well. And we also have workshops that were put on, like this Bitcoin Accepted Here workshop that myself and Pavlonex had. And this one is for the, like there's this merchant tools like BTC Pay Server. So, if Bitcoin is this platform that you build on, like build a bank on, right? BTC Pay Server is kind of like the payment processor that generates the invoices and whatnot, and sends the Bitcoin wherever you want it to go. And there's a bunch of administration tools and whatnot. And BTC Pay Server is it's an open source project. So yeah, we were just trying to like work through the some user experience stuff for there to understand things from a merchant perspective. And yeah, all these calls, the GitHub activity, all that's what's going on, conversation, it becomes a little difficult to keep track of things, right? So especially for like more casual members who are following along. So we needed to find a way to help people stay informed. So we made a newsletter. We also have a Twitter. The calls, as I mentioned, are uploaded to YouTube. We try to be diligent about that. And if you notice, there's been this pattern so far where we're trying to meet people and help them by providing access, right? And being public by default, being open, right? So Christoph is going to share with you now some thoughts about, this, how we work in the open and like the underlying structure in this whole kind of madness. Christoph, take it away.
Thanks, John. Excellent work, and sorry for messing up some of your slides. This was worked smoother during config. All right, so open design. So when this community just got off the ground, with just a handful of people, a few dozens of people hanging out, I also asked myself these things. Well, how do you organize a design community? What are our goals? What are things that we can do? What are things we can't do? How do we make decisions? Who makes decisions? How do you prioritize everything? And very big discussions here to figure out how we can make this big difference that we want to make. And some of us had a background in open source, and open source kind of had a lot of this stuff figured out over the last few decades. And it's more natural for developers, programmers to work this way in public. And but we found that there are also some issues where it just doesn't click the right way for designers. Our tools are a little bit different. What we create is different. How we interact is a little bit different. And so we came across this term open design. I like this term a lot. It's not necessarily a new term, but it's still kind of undefined and not that widespread. But we kind of embraced it to represent some of the way that we think we'd like to do this work. And it starts with the word open, of course, and open means that things are public by default. So as designers, a lot of times we tend to just sit by ourselves or in a small team, design this perfect little thing, and then once it's done and perfect and polished, we put it out there, and that's kind of it. And you can create really good things there, but you can also create very different types of things with very different outcome if you start by being public from the very beginning, from the very first idea, maybe from the first sketch. And if you invite people in, if you share your process, your thoughts, and you allow that to be shaped by others, and you also kind of give some of that ownership to them. So it takes some time to think about design differently and get used to it, but this is kind of one of the foundations. And on the other hand, so if you make things public by default, that means that if you stumble across things that other people do, you are also you're invited to just show up and give your feedback and participate. And that is also something that takes getting used to. If we look at a lot of designs, we're supposed to look at them, maybe give some likes or so, say, yeah, this is awesome portfolio piece, or nice colors or so. But here, when we come across things, we're invited to really participate and to debate and discuss and questions and push a little bit here and push a little bit there and bring in our own ideas. So it turns into a collaboration. And a big thing that happens here is that the idea of ownership completely changes. So what's mine is yours, is ours, and everybody's. And also that changes over time as people join projects and leave projects. And the overall shape of something can completely change. And the most noticeable is this in the idea of anonymous contributions. We had one designer who, we still don't know who that person is, but they contributed a coin selection, a design for coin selection on smartphones, which was at that time, and it still is, kind of heavily discussed. And it was a very well thought out UI solution, and they shared these complete design files, but did not want to be personally associated with it. And that's pretty cool. So here's a design that now belongs to everybody, and others have already built on top of it. And it creates these really interesting dynamics between the individual and everyone else. And it allows you as an individual also to focus on the things that you care about and bring in your unique ideas, instead of feeling like you always have to represent, let's say, a company or anything like that. And sounds chaotic, kind of is chaotic sometimes. And when you have so much individual freedom to do what you want, then it can sound really tricky to actually figure out how to do anything. And that's where this idea of coming to agreement through consensus comes in. So I've seen some designers sometimes show up in open source and say, hey, I have this complete redesign of everything. It was just massive thing, really big chunks. And that is usually not so helpful. Better is to start with something small. And then through many, many small iterations over time, a project changes or grows and turns into something that is more organically evolved. And that happens through many small debates and interactions over long periods of time. And you find a consensus through that by having very fair debates about that are very considerate of each other and the project. And it leads to this kind of organic growth or natural selection by popular demand, if you will. And a good example of this is how Bitcoin has grown, where the individual creator is not even active anymore. We still don't know who they are, and yet it's grown into this thing that estimated 100 million people plus around the world already use. And there are some design ideas in Bitcoin too, like the evolution of visuals here. So here on the left, you see the first Bitcoin logo or symbol that came up. I think it was in the first UI that was created in 2009, just a simple BC, golden coin, kind of a little bit comic or a video game like. Then in February, another version was released, and that picked up, that borrowed the Thai baht currency symbol for Bitcoin and kind of refined the style a little bit more. And then, a totally different person, a random person called BitBoy on the Bitcoin Talk forum then released this version you see on the right, and the one that we still recognize today. And it was just he said like, hey, I made these graphics, anybody can use them, whatever you want. And it was this logo and a few other promotional graphics, like Bitcoin accepted here, I think, and a few other ones. And somehow the Internet Hive Mind decided that this was it. This is what everybody wants to use. There was no marketing department or design agency involved. It was just the Internet decided. And now, here, this is in Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. You can buy eggs with Bitcoin all the way, around the world. And this continues with the Satoshi symbol today, where if you're not aware yet, Bitcoin has subunits. So 100 million Satoshi make up one Bitcoin. And we don't have a symbol yet for it. There are different concepts out there, like the ones that you see here that were created by individual designers. Some were posted on Twitter, some have dedicated websites and are fleshed out in more detail with all kinds of thinking and backgrounds and ideas. And, nothing has been really adopted yet, so we might not need one, we might not have one, or it might be one of those that you see here, or it might be something that you propose, because whatever you create and whatever you propose is just as valid as what everybody else here does too. And that's kind of one of the key things, is this individual ambition. And that's one of the cool things that I also really appreciate about the community, is when new people show up and they bring in their own ideas and their own topics they care about, their own way in which they find Bitcoin fascinating and want to do something. For example, Alexa has her Bitcoin 2140 art project. Tor is researching memorization techniques. Bitpain is creating VR spaces, and John's was doing sprint workshops. Nice job, John's. And on the other hand, on the other side of this individual ambition, we have these group or community projects, and that goes back to one of the things John's mentioned earlier, where we had individual designers out there and we were kind of working on our things, but we were really missing like a human interface guidelines or these shared resources where the information was just bundled and compressed. And that's what we're trying to do here. And there are dozens of people working on this. And this is very much unlike the individual projects, which are more driven by, the one or two or a handful of contributors. There are dozens of people working here on these different sections and on images and content and rewriting content and the glossary. And through all of those little interactions, the whole thing takes shape. And we hope it becomes bigger and better and more useful over time. There are also design resources. The first one that kind of went live is the Bitcoin Icons, bitcoinicons.com, because we did find that different projects like Zeus and Spectre and other ones, and even for prototypes and mockups, you just kind of end up needing the same icons over and over. And some of these are generic UI icons, but they're also specific ones like wallet and mining and node. And then instead of recreating the same ones over and over, we now have one resource where everybody can just plug and play them. And the same thing with the wallet UI kit, which is still in progress. But the idea here is also that it's a solid foundation for anybody who wants to design interfaces using Bitcoin. So they have these pre-built pieces that they can very easily customize to their needs and save a lot of time getting started. And there'll probably be more to come over time. And then we have these actual collaborations. with real projects, because some of those projects don't have designers. There might be small teams, or we also have these resources now. We have the design guide, and we of course need to validate it to ensure that what we dream up there is actually real and helpful and works in the real world. So we're trying to collaborate with different projects. SUSE, for example, Tiana, Stephen, and Bosch. And then Spectre is another project like that. This one is more intricate. It's a more advanced Bitcoin software for multi-key coordination or multi-sig coordination. And also the UX problems are a little bit more intricate. So not something you necessarily want to start into right if you're just new to Bitcoin. But it's a lot more challenging to sort out some of this stuff. And if you are new, then just take your time. Take it slow, and just be curious. Introduce yourself. Say hi. Talk about what interests you. Ask questions. If you see something somebody's working on, just take a peek. Because it happens very quickly to just show up and try to take in too much, try to do too much, and just get burnt out or get exhausted. And that's not something that that doesn't really help anyone. So whether it's Bitcoin open design or other open design, just kind of take it slow and start with curiosity and just joining the community and poking around. Then the second thing that you can do if you want to get active is reviewing the work that's going on, because this consensus building process is so crucial. Reviewing is also crucial, because that's kind of how things get pushed forward, and it allows the people that work on this very deeply. They also need this external feedback and these different perspectives so they can be confident what they're doing is actually the thing that helps a lot of people and that reflects what everybody wants to do. So a lot of times very underestimated. Definitely help review things. Then if you want to take it a step further and practically get something done that makes it into a project like the guide or something else, the good first task label with this color here that you might see on GitHub issues, which are basically just lists of tasks or to-dos. Take a look at for this one, because those are tasks that are intentionally picked out for people who are new to a project or new to open source, open design, and who just want to go through the process one time, get something done. And then, once they've been through that, got something done, maybe they have just a little time, then they become familiar with things, and then they can go on to bigger and better things. And if you do that a few times, if you hang out, you participate, then all of a sudden you are part of the project, and there's no label. You don't get a badge. You don't sign a contract. You are just part of the project because you show up. And that might be a little bit ambiguous, because in the real world, in companies, it doesn't work that way. You can are assigned a project, or then you can pick a project, and then you're on the member list. But in open source, open design, it's a little bit different. If you just show up, you're part of it, and you kind of have to live with that ambiguity. I think one thing that happens sometimes is that if you show up and you help out, then other people start relying on you. So you made some really good, give some good design feedback. They might ask you next time too, and that's kind of a pretty cool thing to experience. And then, of course, Bitcoin is an open platform. If you want to be super ambitious, start your own project, kick things off, share your ideas, find some people to collaborate with, and just do your own thing. Because if you don't like your bank's website or your bank's app, there's nothing you can do. But you can always design a better, cooler, more interesting, more appropriate Bitcoin experience. That's totally open. So definitely a very cool, very exciting design space that we have going on here. And hopefully, it excites you as much as it excites me. But Bitcoin, only 12 years old. Design community, 9, maybe 10 months old now. Very young. We need to mature a lot. A lot of things we said here, we'll probably know better a few months down the road. We need to grow, mature, discuss, improve all of this stuff. But I'm pretty sure that if we try to get better a little bit day by day all together, then we can make a difference and achieve some of our goals. And that was kind of it. And then we just thank the audience, you for listening, design community members who helped put this presentation together, Especially shout out to the people in the video. And then Pablo Stanley, who created these illustrations, the Open Peeps illustrations that we used throughout this guide. And as you know, Bitcoin.design is our home, your home, for now and forever. Okay, Johns, how was that? Do you have any thoughts you wanted to share? We're good?
No, we're good. Thanks for joining, everyone. And yeah, let's design Bitcoin for everyone, and let's figure out what that is.
And especially if you did not like something in this presentation, these are all great discussion points to pick up and talk about in the Slack and everywhere else. Because this presentation was done by Johns and I, big parts of us. We try to reflect what everybody's doing very well, but maybe they did not. And then, this is would make for great conversation. Always happy to hear. And that's it. Over and out. Peace.
Bye.